It's good to be back, and yes, folks, this is episode number 10 of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with Kenneth the K-Rock Cline. Hi, everyone, Kenneth the K-Rock Cline here, so you already know me by now. And, folks, I need to apologize. You know, one thing that I've always been told whenever I make a mistake, or before I'm in the process of making a mistake, is double or triple check. And, unfortunately, I violated that rule when I accidentally revealed on the last episode that it was episode 10, when in reality that was episode number 9. But don't worry, I managed to get myself better. This is episode number 10. Yes, I can confirm this is the 10th episode of Krocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Rock. And I hope you guys are excited about this one, as I am, because, folks, I'm going to be doing something a little different this time. I'm going to be talking a little bit about some certain things that have been kind of bothering me lately, not just from a sports perspective, but from life's perspective, if you will. And then I'm going to be talking about the situation with Nikola Jokic. He won the MVP. He's got the Denver Nuggets on the cusp of heading back to the Western Conference Finals, possibly to repeat as champions. But where will Nikola Jokic rank as far as the all-time greatest players in the history of the NBA? Some people are already putting him in the top 10, others kind of on the border, but we're going to get into all that in just a moment. But first and foremost, I got to get a little beef out of the way. Folks, you probably know that on my other podcast, Two Pals on a Pod, which you can listen to on Buzzsprout, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, you kind of know that there used to be a segment I used to do whenever things kind of bothered me and I would be so enraged and very upset and disappointed. Yeah, that segment. And I would just let my frustrations out. I call it a croc attack. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time on this new podcast, I am pulling out a croc attack. Yes, I'm pulling out a croc attack. And folks, I'm a little bit disappointed. Because as we all know, the NFL has yet to release their schedule as of this podcast. They actually are going to do it at 7 p.m. It is currently 5:42 Wednesday, May 15th, at my time. It may be different times in your area, but as of this point, the NFL has yet to release their schedule. However, they have already leaked out some critical games for this season, and I was curious to know exactly what games were going to be had. The first game of the season is going to be between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens, which I'm okay with it. I mean, I think that's a good matchup. I don't know if fans wanted that matchup after the Chiefs, not saying they dominated the Ravens, but they kind of made the Ravens offense look really stupid and Lamar Jackson not play like the MVP. But the Kansas City Chiefs, the two-time champions, looking for their third Super Bowl in a row, are going to be hosting the Baltimore Ravens to open up their season. And that's definitely something that a lot of NFL fans are curious about. Then you had some other big-name games out there. You had your international games. Minnesota's going. Jacksonville's going. I think the Chicago Bears are going. That might be interesting considering Caleb Williams is the quarterback of the team. And so, as of this point, it hasn't all been confirmed, but I have been getting a lot of schedule leaks lately, particularly with the Texans, my Houston Texans, and, well, let's just say I got a little beef with the NFL, because I knew we were going to get a lot of primetime games this year, and I knew we were going to be facing the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens in the same season. What I didn't expect was that the Houston Texans were going to be taking on the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens within a 5-day radius around December. Are you kidding me? You have the Texans taking on the Kansas City Chiefs on December 21st. Then, 4 days later, guess what? It's Merry Christmas Day, and you're going to be playing the Baltimore Ravens. Are you having a joke? Is this funny? You think this is real funny? to have the Texans play the two best teams in the AFC from last year simultaneously. Well, not simultaneously, but close to each other. Like, are you for real? Like, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, okay, the Texans are an interesting team. They have a team that is up and coming. They can build something. But are they really as real as they say, even with all the additions they had with Joe Mixon, Stephon Diggs, Danielle Hunter, just to name a few? Are they really for real? Let's see. Why don't we give them an interesting challenge? Let's give them a gauntlet of games. Oh, I have an idea. Why don't we put the Kansas City Chiefs against them on December 21st and then have the Texans go up against the Baltimore Ravens on the 25th? If they are really AFC contenders, let's see if they can beat both of them, or if they can maybe push them to a certain element. Trust me, if you're a Houston fan, you have to be thinking, they don't respect us. The NFL does not respect us. It is without question ludicrousy for them to put the two best AFC teams like 5 days apart, really, because you're going to have a short rest. You're basically having a short rest from Sunday all the way to Thursday on Christmas. Texans are going to be in Kansas City that Sunday, and then they're going to come back on that Thursday, that Christmas game, and they're going to host the game against the Ravens. Like, this is just ridiculous. Like, it is absolutely insane. Like, I get it. NFL schedules are going to be challenging no matter how you look at it. But at the end of the day, the fact that you have the Texans going up against the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Texans 5 days apart around Christmas time, when the Texans could be in a position to clinch an AFC division title, let alone be the best team in the AFC by the end of the regular season, you decide to throw a gauntlet on them? As far as I'm concerned, the NFL stands for not for long. Because if you're the city of Houston, you have to say, not for long. We are no longer going to be abused. We're no longer going to be bullied. We're no longer going to be pestered by the fans who don't think we deserve to even be in the conversation. This is absolutely ridiculous. I think this is the dumbest thing the NFL is about to do. But you know what? I digress. I'm not going to have a problem. I think it's going to be fair to say that the Texans are going to accept the challenge. I don't think they care about the schedule. I think they care about who's on their schedule and when they're going to play, and they're going to be ready. And trust me, people might say, well, the Texans have to play the Chiefs and the Ravens. It's going to be the other way around. The Chiefs and the Ravens have to play the Texans. And I know Baltimore fans are going to be looking at me saying, what happened last year? Did y'all score an offensive touchdown? Did Stroud lead an offensive touchdown and all that? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, what happened last year and all that? Listen, that Texans team had no business being on the field with y'all. But by the way, what did y'all do against the Chiefs? Trust me, this Texans team is going to get better. And sometimes in order to be the best, you have to beat the best. And speaking of beating the best, I'm trying to beat the best version of myself as I continue on with this podcast. And folks, we're going to be talking about something that I really wanted to discuss and get my mind off of at this point. So folks, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Folks, I wanted to start this segment by talking about something that has been kind of on my mind lately. Well, actually, this has been a thing that's been kind of bothering me for the last few days because, I always try to be a very good person. I always try to be hardworking and dedicated to my job, but I felt like the last few days ago, I wasn't really sure if I had done just that. Now, just to give you some context, for those of you that don't know, I currently work at Lamar University. I'm the assistant director of media relations. And, one of the things I do is I cover all the sports teams here at Lamar University. So basically, I'm given certain teams to cover. So I cover our soccer team, I cover men's and women's, or I cover women's basketball, I cover men's and women's golf, track and field, cross country, and softball, basically. Well, I'm kind of part-time softball now because we had a GA that actually works there right now, and he was responsible for softball, but I help out when I can. So I cover those teams, and I'm trying to see if there was any other team that I forgot. So women's soccer, men's and women's golf, men's and women's cross country, men's and women's track, women's basketball, and softball. And I think that's about it. That's all I can really think of. So, yeah. So I cover those sports basically in my day to day job. And, the season's kind of winding down. We don't really have much going on. Our softball season ended. The only sport that I think is still going on for me is track and field. But we've gotten past the conference championships, and we're probably going to have some athletes compete in the regionals. So I'm looking forward to see how our athletes do. But anyway, so I want to talk about something that happened on Monday that has been kind of bothering me, and I've had conversations about this with my family and with some other folks. But so it's May now, and there has been a lot of weather-related activity. We're seeing a lot of thunderstorms and severe flooding and tornado warnings out there as well. But obviously we get those every year, but it feels like this year more so than in recent years, it's been kind of picking up. I don't know if that's really been the case, because I'm sure y'all probably have had some encounters in the past, or whether or not you've had some this year. But on Monday, I went to work, just thinking, okay, start of another week. It's probably gonna be a light week for me, but I'm gonna treat it like it's just a normal work week. And all of a sudden, I get an email from the people at Lamar University's emergency crew that basically keep track of everything that's going on, whether it be weather-related activities or intruder on campus. You get that point. So they sent out an email that said, okay, we're keeping an eye on weather-related, some potential for some severe weather-related activities and everything, and we'll keep you up to date and let you know what's going on. So I checked the weather app, and I noticed that it's going to be some severe weather coming in. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is probably going to be a weather-related day. And we're probably going to get a lot of rain. We're definitely going to get some lightning, maybe some flooding, maybe a little tornado warning here and there or so. But, it's going to be one of those rough days. And I've had my fair share of encounters with tornado warnings. And I'll be honest, I really hate tornadoes. And I'm sure a lot of people do. God bless him, I blame Bill Paxton for doing the Twister movie, because that movie scared me. Now, I saw it recently, and I wasn't as frightful of it as I had been, but back when it first came out, like I was 5 years old, I did not like tornado movies. Anything with tornadoes, whether it be movies or whether it be, with severe storms, I hated them. And to tell you the truth, dark clouds in the sky, they always scared me, because you just didn't know, because you never really knew if there was going to be any activity related to the storms and all that. But I've kind of gotten better over the years. I definitely have gotten better in terms of maturity from stormy weather and everything. So I'm always prepared with what I'm going to do. I go, whenever there's a storm, I go to the closet, I go to the bathroom and everything. But problem this time for me is my apartment is currently on the second floor of a building. Now, previously I had been in a one-floor apartment, which I liked it. It was really simple. I could just go downstairs. But this time I'm in a second floor apartment, and I'm not, jinxing it here, but I feel like the building I'm in is okay, but that still doesn't mean anything could go wrong whenever there is an event of a tornado. So just to give you a little bit of side information. But anyway, so I was working after I received the email letting me know that there was going to be some possible severe weather, but they were going to keep track of it. A couple hours later, I get another email from them, and they say, okay, there's going to be some severe weather coming in. Because of that, we're going to grant everyone an early release at 2 o'clock. So, okay, it's a campus-wide thing, 2 o'clock, I'm going. And, I leave at 2 o'clock just as expected, and I drive back to my apartment prepared for what should be a typical rough night. Now, when I get back, I'm so tired for some reason. I'm so tired. I just had a interesting day, and I'm still focused on that. I'm preparing myself for this severe weather that's going to come in. Like, I'm ready to go. I'm next to a bathroom. I'm next to a closet. I have a couple options there. Got some food. So I'm preparing myself for this. But I'm so tired that for some reason I just fell asleep. I took a nap. And I took a nap for a couple hours. And I wake up and I glance out, and there's still some rain and everything, but it seemed like the weather had, most of the severe weather had passed over. And I was just like, huh, that's interesting. So I find out later that the weather had actually hit Sulphur, Louisiana, and Lake Charles. And if you're listening from those areas, I do, send out my thoughts and prayers and hope everything was okay down there. But there had been some reported, at least a reported tornado down in that area. So it basically missed over, and we didn't get any of that. So whatever I was preparing for wasn't necessary for this day. But I I felt kind of bad and terrible because I always plan on staying 9 to 5, and yet I was told by the organization, the university, that we had to leave early release at 2 o'clock, and I said, okay, I'm going to do that. So I leave. But because we had nothing, the last time, let me backtrack here. The last time this had happened, when they gave us an early release because of the weather, there was a tornado warning within our area. Now, we didn't get hit, and I think it happened in like Port Arthur or Port Neches or one of those areas, like when the storm fell down. But we had a tornado warning right in our area, so we didn't get hit, but it went past us. So I thought, okay, because of the early release, it's going to happen. We're going to get something in our area. Well, that didn't happen, and I felt kind of foolish because if I had known that there wasn't going to be any severe weather and in a severe storm in that area, I probably wouldn't have left. I would have stayed for another 3 hours at my job, try to get as much done as I can, and then take off. But, and I know this sounds silly to think about it, because, you don't really know when the weather is going to hit. You don't know when the storm is coming. You know it's going to be bad, you know it's going to be severe, but you just don't know how severe it is. And they have meteorologists that do a job to prepare you. So we were under a tornado watch, but we were not under a warning. And for whatever reason, I guess they canceled the watch because it just passed over us. The clouds, the sky that would have made it seem like there was going to be a tornado, it just passed over us. And I just think back, thinking to myself, man, I feel terrible just being able to leave work when I know, obviously it's a bad situation and they granted us the opportunity to leave, but sometimes you wonder, like, it does it make you look kind of bad and foolish when you did what they told you to do, but at the end of the day, nothing happened. And I know that they made a decision because they thought it was going to come, and obviously this isn't like, the boy who cried wolf, where a little boy tells a village, hey, there's a wolf in the area, wolf, wolf. And they come, and twice they came, and twice there was no wolf, and so they left. And then the third time, the boy actually did see a wolf, and he tried to run and tell the village, but the villagers didn't believe him because of distrust and everything. And so, and that's not to say I distrust the university system. I like it. I really respect it. They gave us good advice and good tips on what you do, especially if there was a storm in the area or on campus for that matter. But I just kind of felt bad because, you sometimes think where you're at. We work in a building, a big gym, that it's probably the safest venue to stay. And we're not quite underground, but we're not surrounded by any windows or and all that. However, you look back and you think, yeah, that's not, it can happen anywhere and any place, and it probably would have made more sense to go back to the apartment, because if I had stayed and there had been a storm that passed through, my car would have been towed, or my car would have been destroyed, and I wouldn't have had anywhere else to go. So, I'm glad I made the right decision, but I was thinking about this. I read somewhere that there was a small business, I forget what state, it might have been somewhere up in the Midwest area. There was a small business that had gotten reports that have that there was going to be some bad weather there, and they wanted to get out, they wanted to go back to wherever it is that they live, their houses, to see their families, to make sure that everything's okay and to be ready for the storm. But their bosses were like, no, you're going to stay here. You're going to stay here, and we're going to keep working. And that, unfortunately, turned out to be a big mistake because the tornado did strike that area. And I can't remember if there were any survivors in that building that they were in, but there were a number of people that had perished in the storm. So it just kind of makes you think that in this day and age, obviously, you want to work, you have requirements, you have to be at work at time, you have to show up, you have to do your job and all this and that. And asking for some time off, yeah, it can be a bit of a complicated process, but for me, it's always something I take pride in. But what if this was a situation where there was a storm coming in, and you have to figure out a way to get out? You're about 17 to 20 minutes away from your house, and you work at a different part of town, and you're trying to get there. What if the weather's going to be bad, that there's a potential for a storm? What if the situation comes about where you're stuck at work? Obviously, they have guidelines for what happens in the event of a tornado. But what if there was a place that distrusted you? What if it was in a situation where you didn't really have complete faith and trust in the storm, and you were so worried that you felt like you had to get back home to be with your kids, obviously? What if that was a situation where you just didn't trust the location and you felt like you needed to go, back to them just to make sure they're safe and be ready for what could be coming? And what if the boss is like, I can't do that, that's not going to happen because everything's fine? Is it that he didn't treat safety as the top requirement for human employees? Was he more focused on money, or was he more focused on safety? I mean, that's always been a common problem in society these days, where you have organizations that care more about making money and lots of things, that they don't take safety as much as humans. And we've seen a number of tragedies in architecture or natural disasters, or anywhere for that matter. I mean, shucks, the Titanic sank because it struck an iceberg because of this public perception that it was unsinkable. Well, we don't know how that went. But I say all this to say that I think at times we can doubt ourselves, thinking that even though what we were told was the right thing, what we were told was what we had to do, was a requirement, it was mandatory, and that we had to leave to go back to our places just so we can avoid being hit by the storm. You sometimes wonder if we really were in a situation, like if we were in a situation that we needed to make some more money, if we left because of something that we thought was right, would the bosses be okay with it? Because I feel like most bosses would definitely be okay with it because they wanted to make sure that we're safe. But I know there's some bosses out there that really don't prioritize safety over everything else because they're busy focused on money, and if you're not doing your job well, you're probably going to get fired. So it's a hard thing for me to think about, because at the end of the day, I know I made the right decision. I know that the university made the right call to have everyone leave early, even though nothing came about it. And sometimes you think, man, I was so silly for leaving. But I think at the end of the day, it was the right call. And I know y'all are probably going to be saying, well, gee, you need to listen to that you need to listen to your university. You need to do what they tell you to do. And I agree with you. I trust the university system. I trust that they prioritize safety and everything. But sometimes you're not, you always have to be prepared for any kind of weather conditions, whether it's with tornadoes or with floods or hurricanes and everything. And, I think back to when I want to say it was Hurricane Rita, was about to hit Houston, and we all had to leave. We all drove to my grandparents' house in Louisiana just to stay there, and in case of the weather. And fortunately, nothing really happened, but we all prepared because in case it was going to happen. You might look back and say, well, we're fortunate it didn't happen, or you might say, we wasted all our time driving and, and it didn't hit. Well, I guess sometimes in life you have to prepare for something even though it's not going to happen. And that was kind of one of the things that I had been thinking about, and it was kind of bothering me as well. So I know it sounds like I'm being a little psychological here, but at the end of the day, I do know that everything happened for a reason, and I'm glad nothing happened here. And I'm also thoughtful and praying for the people that were hit by the storms and everything, because there's definitely been a lot of storms that have been happening over the last couple of years, and especially for this month. But that's just my thoughts on the matter. What also is my thoughts on the matter is my next subject. We're going to be talking about Nikola Jokic. Was he deserving of the MVP? We will find out when we come back. We are back for our next segment. And folks, right now there is a lot going on in the NBA, particularly with the NBA playoffs. Looking at some score updates as of this podcast. The Boston Celtics eliminating the Cleveland Cavaliers in 5 games, so they are back in the Eastern Conference Finals. They're going to be waiting for the winner of the New York Knicks and the Indiana Pacers. Right now that series has New York leading 3-2 after a Game 5 victory, so maybe Boston will take on New York after this point. In the Western Conference semifinals, the Dallas Mavericks currently lead by 10 over the Oklahoma City Thunder in Game 5, so that is a great series to keep an eye on for. But then you have the Denver Nuggets, who, after winning Game 5, 112-97, have overcome with 2-0 deficit to the Minnesota Timberwolves, find themselves one win away from advancing to the Western Conference Finals. And a big reason why has been the play of Nikola Jokic. Now, Nikola Jokic, who up to this point, after Game 5 where he scored 40 points, he has averaged 20 or more points in the 5-game series in 4 of the 5. The game that he didn't was in Game 2. But Nikola Jokic, who has really been arguably the best player in the NBA, this season was averaged 26.4 points per game. He averaged 34.6 minutes, along with 12.4 rebounds, 9 assists, 1.4 steals, and close to 1 block per game. And as a result, the NBA offered Nikola Jokic his 3rd career regular season MVP. He is now a 3-time Most Valuable Award winner, and you can make a case that he deserved to win the MVP award this season. But, in my personal opinion, and I say this with all high respect to Nikola Jokic and what he's done in his career, I don't think he was deserving to win it this year. On my other podcast, Two Pals on a Pod, with Mark T. Robinson, we talked about who we thought was going to win the MVP, and both of us agreed that it was going to be Shai Gilgeous-Alexander of the Oklahoma City Thunder. The guy averaged 30.1 points per game. He averaged 5.5 rebounds and 6.2 assists, as well as 2 steals per game. And he was really the anchor, the leader of a Thunder team that really surprised a lot of people. You knew they were going to be a good team, but you didn't think that they would be as good and talented as they were, to the point where they finished with the best record in the Western Conference. Now, as it stands right now, they are currently trailing the Dallas Mavericks in a series that has been really unpredictable because I have Dallas, as much as I hate to say it, going to the Western Conference Finals. But you can't say that Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is not deserving of the MVP award and that Nikola Jokic is. Now listen, I'm not saying Nikola Jokic wasn't a good candidate. He was a good candidate. He's going to be a good candidate. But right now, Nikola Jokic is in a situation where he now needs to perform yet again to win a championship. Last year he done that. He averaged 30 points per game, was named the Finals MVP as Denver defeated the Miami Heat in 5 games. He's already earned 6 All-Star appearances. He was named 3-time All-NBA First Team, 2-time NBA All-Second Team, and was a rookie first team when he entered his first year in 2016. So Nikola Jokic has earned a spot to be one of the best players in the NBA. But when I think of Nikola Jokic, I think of the times where he should have won MVP and the times where he shouldn't have won MVP. Nikola Jokic won his first MVP in 2021. Now, that was a bizarre season because this happened after the COVID-19 circumstance, but I don't think you can argue that he wasn't deserving of the MVP that year. 2022, however, that's where I felt like he shouldn't have won the MVP. In my opinion, that should have gone to Joel Embiid for that season. Even though the Philadelphia 76ers that year won 51 games and Joel Embiid was involved in 68 starts, that season, I don't know if there was a player that played better than he did. With 30.6 points, was involved in an NBA All-Star game. He has 11.7 rebounds per game, 4.2 assists, and he got the Philadelphia 76ers to the Western Conference, or the Eastern Conference semifinals. Keep in mind, the Sixers play in the Eastern Conference, not the Western Conference. You know, there's a Philadelphia, Mississippi, I think, and that might count as a Western Conference if the NBA were to allow a team down there. But, back to my point. I didn't think that Jokic was deserving of the MVP award because even though he averaged like 30 points per game, or 31 points per game that season. I just felt like Joel Embiid was just a hair better despite not playing in only 68 games and finishing with, leading the Sixers to 51 wins. But then we get to 2022-2023 last season, and it looked like Nikola Jokic was going to win his 3rd straight MVP. And then all of a sudden, Kendrick Perkins goes on record to say, well, the only reason why Nikola Jokic is winning is because people are voting for white players and everything, and Joel Embiid is black. And you just are like, Kendrick, what are you talking about? That is not the reason why people vote for the MVP. You try to make it a race conversation, and that's not the case. And it shouldn't be the case. Because there have been more black players winning the NBA MVP than there have been white players. You should know that, Kendrick, by now. Whether he did it intentionally or unintentionally, Kendrick Perkins somehow, indirectly, got the voters to look at Joel Embiid, who put up great numbers that season. 33.1 points per game, and he led the Sixers to the best record in the NBA that season. Whereas Nikola Jokic, I think he became sort of a victim of that circumstance because he had 30 points per game, and you can argue, or in the playoffs that year, and you can argue that there might have been a reason why Nikola Jokic is deserving to win the MVP because he led the Nuggets to the best record in the Western Conference, and they would go on to win the championship in the regular season. But then this past year, I just think Nikola Jokic, 26.4 points, leads Denver to the best record again. But you expected that. You expected Denver to be the best team in the Western Conference, or one of the best. You didn't think that it was going to be the Oklahoma City Thunder. And this is where the MVP, to me, has kind of lost its luster. Because there is no set narrative as far as how the MVP should look. Are you talking about a player that led their team to the best record in the NBA? Or are you talking about the player that put up the best numbers in the NBA? To me, the MVP has to be a player that is more valuable to everyone. Michael Jordan won 5 MVPs in his career. But you can imagine how he felt when Charles Barkley won the MVP award in 93 and Karl Malone won the MVP award in 97. 2 years that Jordan put up some great numbers, but the NBA decided to give the MVP award to those players because they had more impact on their teams than Michael did. And it wasn't that they didn't think Michael was going to carry or continue to have that impact. It's just that it might have been a severe case of voter fatigue. So you're talking about a situation where I think that might come into fact. But right now, there is clearly no set standard for a narrative as far as who the MVP should really be. Who is really deserving of the MVP? I can go all the way back to 2015 when Steph Curry won his first MVP award. And I didn't have a problem with it because Steph Curry won the MVP award. He led the Warriors to the best record and eventually led them to a championship. In 2016, he leads Golden State to a 73-9 record, and he wins his second straight MVP. Okay, he deserved to win the MVP that season, no problem. But then, in 2017, James Harden leads the Rockets to the best record in the Western Conference, or second best record in the Western Conference, because Golden State was still a legitimate threat. But in the end, it's Russell Westbrook who gets the MVP because of his triple-doubles. And that's kind of hard to say. I mean, Russell Westbrook is a talented player, and that season he was remarkable in the triple-doubles, but what happened to the narrative that you had to lead your team to winning games? Oklahoma City that year barely made the playoffs while the Rockets were clearly, a James Harden-led team, and they were superior and more talented. And that's really hard to say that I would have picked a guy that put up all the triple-doubles more so than James Harden, who led the Rockets to success and basically carried them all the way to the best or the second best record in the NBA that season. But they ended up giving Russell Westbrook the award. Harden does get his MVP in 2018, leads Houston to their best record in franchise history. So he is an MVP winner. Then you got Giannis Antetokounmpo, who ends up winning back-to-back MVPs in 2019 and 2020. And of course, there was a little bit of conflict there as James Harden was not too happy about it. In fact, James Harden to me should have won a second MVP. He could have been an MVP in 2017, but they gave it to Westbrook instead. But this is the thing that I have an issue with when it comes to MVPs. Again, there's no set standard. There's no narrative. There's no rules and regulations for what you have to do. Like in my job of college, in my job as a college athletics worker, I have to nominate players for all conference and then academic all conference, and there are strict requirements. You have to play in a certain number of games. You have to achieve something or achieve some milestones along the way. And if you're talking about all academics, you have to attain a certain GPA. So therefore, you have a chance to be student athlete of the year or player of the year. And of course, everybody votes in a conference. I just think the problem with the NBA is it's not about strict regulations. It's about who is the story, who is the best player, who's the most inspiring story. Because there's always different narratives every year. A player that leads his team to the best record, or a player that carries his team to the playoffs. The problem is Nikola Jokic is so good and so talented that we are expecting him to be in the MVP conversation. And yet, I just don't think he deserves to win. He deserves to win 3 at this point. He's a 3-time winner. I've accepted that. But Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is more deserving of the MVP award because he led Oklahoma City to the best record in the Western Conference. So, to me, it just feels like the NBA might be giving Nikola Jokic a makeup award because of what happened last year, where Jokic was kind of a victim of Kendrick Perkins' race-baiting argument. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with his opinion, and I know he might have felt that way, but that really wasn't necessary. But Nikola Jokic, without question, is going to be a great player. And he has a legitimate chance to be in the top 10 all-time best ever. But you got to be very careful when you say that, because players will probably struggle downwards. They may have a period where, okay, they are the top 10 player, but then they go through a tough stretch where they don't seem to live up to their expectations and they falter. Kevin Durant is an example. He was a top 10 player when he played for Golden State. But now, after playing with the Nets and playing with the Phoenix Suns, he's not a top 10 player anymore. LeBron James, on average, is a top 10 player of all time. But despite the fact that he hasn't been able to carry the Los Angeles Lakers to more than one championship, you can't say he's a top 10 player right now. And I think that's where we struggle with picking out top 10 players, because there are always going to be people that have their top 10 set up and locked in for the rest of their lives. I know I'm that example. And it's hard for me to remove at least one or two guys from my top 10 list out of the picture. Now, I think Nikola Jokic will be a top 15 best player of all time for me. However, we're dealing with recency bias, where we're in the moment and we don't seem to look at the big picture from time to time. We might think now that he is a top 10 player. We might think he's the best player in the NBA right now. But over time, we're going to have to reevaluate him and whether or not he truly is deserving to be in a top 10. Some of y'all will say he is a top 10 player and he will be a top 10 player. Others might say, well, he was a top 10 player, but he kind of is outside looking in. To me, I think Nikola Jokic has an argument to be the second best foreign-born player. Just ahead of Dirk Nowitzki, but just behind Hakeem Olajuwon. And I know I might sound biased when I say that, but I think Nikola Jokic is going to have to do more to achieve that success. Is it require winning a championship? Does it mean he has to win a second championship? Probably. Because he's already won 3 individual titles. Giannis Antetokounmpo was supposed to be the best player in the NBA. He won 2 MVP awards, but he didn't win a championship. He finally gets a championship and has a chance to elevate himself as a successful player, but he hasn't really done that. Now, whether part of that is because of the coaching of Doc Rivers, or it's because the Bucks just haven't been able to figure out how to get themselves to become a potential NBA dynasty, I don't know. But all I know is that we have to be very careful when we're putting top 10 players or picking our top 10 players right now, because there's going to be players that are going to come in and they're going to try to knock out our original top 10 spots and try to make room for themselves in. Nikola Jokic, I just think he's an unbelievable talent. And this postseason, he is proving to be one of the best players. Well, him and Anthony Edwards. Now, those two have been going at it from time to time. I mean, Nikola Jokic, 40 points in Game 5, 35 in Game 4, 24 in Game 3, and then 32 in Game 1. This guy is clearly having his way right now in the NBA playoffs. And this is a guy that if the Nuggets were to get to the Western Conference Finals, you're going to have to figure out how to game plan for him. Just like how you're going to game plan for Jamal Murray or Michael Porter Jr. or Reggie Jackson or all these guys on the Nuggets. They're trying to win their second straight NBA championship, something that Golden State has done recently, and Denver is trying to prove to be the next great NBA dynasty, which, can they do that? That's going to be tough, especially considering the Western Conference is loaded with all these playoff teams and teams that are vying to make the playoffs in the future. But I know this, Nikola Jokic should be given a lot of credit. He should be given respect. People are starting to see how great of a player he is, because I know that he's had a hard time trying to make a name for himself in the NBA, even though when you look at his career in international basketball, he was an outstanding Serbian-born player. And I think for all the Serbians, they definitely have a guy they can look up to. And Nikola Jokic, to me, if he continues to play well, wins another championship, and continues to have all the success, he might have potential to be the best foreign-born player in the history of the NBA. And that may be hard for me to admit now. It may be hard for me to admit later. But you know what? I think Nikola Jokic has what it takes to be a strong player in the NBA, or to be one of the all-time best players in the NBA. And speaking of one of the all-time best, we are going to be closing out the show. And folks, I got to tell you what, we were talking about the NFL schedule earlier. It has been released, and I got the Texans schedule right with me. I'm going to be talking about it real fast and make my early season predictions. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after this. Alright, so earlier I gave out a little bit of my rant about how the NFL decided to schedule the Texans a brutal stretch where they have to play the Kansas City Chiefs and the Baltimore Ravens in 5 days around Christmas time. So in a 5-day stretch, you're talking about playing 2 games against the 2 best teams in the AFC. But since then, I've gotten the full NFL schedule from the Texans, and I got to tell you what, folks, this schedule is going to be real interesting. It's going to be tough, but considering that the Texans are playing a first-place schedule, they are expected to play the 4th hardest schedule in all of the NFL. But I think this will be good enough to help them prepare for the playoffs and hopefully go on a deep playoff run. So, without further ado, I'm going to give my predictions for how I think the Texans season is going to be. Now, these predictions might change as time goes on before we get to the season, but for now, here are my early season predictions for the Houston Texans. Week 1, they're traveling up to Indianapolis, where the last regular season game last year was at Indy, and that was the game the Texans were able to get the win to clinch a playoff spot and also later win the division thanks to Jacksonville losing to Tennessee. So, C.J. Stroud versus Anthony Richardson. Now, the last time Anthony Richardson played the Texans, he was off to a good start. They were up 14-0 or 28-7, I forget, before Richardson went down. Stroud was able to lead a comeback in that game, but not enough to win. But then C.J. Stroud was able to finish out the season, whereas Anthony Richardson did not. Richardson was out for the rest of the year after suffering an injury. So Anthony Richardson still has a lot to prove, but I think this will be a very tight game, especially in Indy. Anthony Richardson will want to show C.J. Stroud that he's the better quarterback, whereas Stroud wants to show that he can elevate himself. It's going to be a bit of a toss-up, but I think Houston will pull this one out maybe around 31-27, depending on how the game goes. It could be a close game, so that, to me, is a win. Week 2, Houston versus Chicago. First primetime game for the Texans of the season. They actually have 6 primetime games this year, and this will be the second game of Caleb Williams' career. Caleb Williams, now the starting quarterback for the Chicago Bears. A battle of 2 great quarterbacks. Williams in his rookie season, Stroud in his second year. A young generation of quarterbacks are starting to follow behind the likes of Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson. And, I mean, obviously, I think Caleb Williams will have a great career in the NFL. I think he'll have a good season. But right now, I think the Bears would probably be a team that's kind of in transition, still trying to figure things out. And I think that might be good for the Texans to take advantage of that. So I'm going to say Houston wins this one. Maybe another close game, but the Texans should take care of business and start 2-0. Week 3, Houston is at Minnesota. This is one of the few teams the Texans have never beaten in their franchise history. But the Vikings are also with a new quarterback in J.J. McCarthy. Of course, Stroud has some bitter memories of dealing with McCarthy since he is 0-2 all-time against him in college. He was unable to beat Michigan, and McCartney is coming off a national championship victory from Michigan. So this will be a tough one. I think this will be a very interesting game. You know, Houston is in Minnesota, but I'm going to make a bold prediction and say the Texans get the job done to win to start 3-0. Then week 4, Houston is hosting Jacksonville. Of course, the Jaguars are a team that missed an opportunity to make it to the playoffs last year, but they seem to be a team looking to revive themselves. I expect another tight game, but I just think Houston will be building off momentum from their first few games that I think it's going to lead to a victory. So Houston will go, I think Houston will win that game as well. 4-0 to start the season. In week 5, this is a revenge game. Buffalo is in town. Stephon Diggs, former Buffalo Bill, taking on his old teammates, including old quarterback Josh Allen. A lot of drama in the offseason regarding Diggs and the Bills and his time there. I think Stephon Diggs was just frustrated that he was unable to get a Super Bowl with the Buffalo Bills, and Bills have really been a team that has missed their opportunity. They still might have a window of opportunity there, but that window is kind of closing down, and I think there's definitely going to be a lot of excitement and hype for that game. I think, like, I know people might say, well, Buffalo's in trouble, they're not this and that, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to make a bit of a bold prediction. I think Buffalo is going to take care of business, and I think they're going to hand Houston their first loss of the season. So Houston will be at 4-1. Then the Texans travel to New England. This is Drake May versus C.J. Stroud. I think the Patriots might be an improved team, new head coach, new era starting for them, but I would not be surprised if the Texans take care of business. So I think they'll win that game. They'll be 5-1. Houston then travels to Green Bay. Now this is a Packers team that is loaded with some incredible talent on the squad. They have another up-and-coming quarterback in Jordan Love. Packers were really a team that made a good playoff run. They almost beat the 49ers in their playoff game. They had a lead, but the 49ers just came back to win. So Green Bay could be a threat in the NFC North and possibly the NFC. And I think the Packers will take care of business against Houston. That's going to be tough, especially playing at Lambeau Field. So I would expect that to happen. All right, Week 8, Houston is hosting Indianapolis. The Texans are going to get the first game there, first victory in Indy. But I think Indianapolis will return the favor, as tough as it is for me to say. Or actually, I have Indianapolis or Houston winning that game. So Houston will actually start 6-2, but then they'll drop to New York, the Jets, in MetLife Stadium. The stadium that C.J. Stroud got hurt in a concussion game, or where he suffered a concussion and was out for the next 2 games. The Texans got brutally bad. I think depending on who's the quarterback for the Jets, whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Tyrod Taylor, I think depending on who's the quarterback of the game, that may be a telltale sign of how things will be for the Texans, and depending, of course, if they can put up some points better, than unlike they did last time. But I think if it's Rodgers there, that may be a bit of a struggle. So even though it's Halloween night, I think the Texans might not be able to be successful. That's a game that I can see them losing, so they'll probably be 6-3. Then Week 10, Houston hosting Detroit. Detroit, of course, a bit of a media darling after their incredible run to the NFC Championship last year. They were 1/2 away from reaching the Super Bowl before blowing a 24-7 lead to the San Francisco 49ers. It's going to be a bit of a tough game for both teams, but I think the Texans might be able to benefit from playing this game. Battle Red Day, Sunday on NBC. That's another primetime game for the Texans. I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that game, and I think I'm going to give Houston the benefit of the doubt here, since they'll probably take care of business. It'll be another close game. They'll probably go 7-3. Week 11, Houston at Dallas. Now, I know most fans are disappointed that this was not the Thanksgiving Day game that they wanted to have, but you know what? It is what it is. Houston's going to Dallas. That should be a great game. And all Texas, well, not all Texas Super Bowl, although that should be something that could be in the foreseeable future. An all Texas showdown. You got C.J. Stroud against Dak Prescott. You've got a bunch of Texans fans and some Houston-Dallas rivalry. Houston wanting to shut Dallas up for claiming that they are all in, and Dallas trying to remind them that this is their territory, whereas it could not be theirs for long, but you never know. And that's actually a Monday night game, and I think everyone's going to have a great game to watch. I think depending on if the Texans can play off their successful season, I think they'll be able to take care of business. Or, because I just don't see how the Cowboys can fare well this season. I mean, they're going to have some issues, I think, with Dak Prescott and the contract situation, also with him performing underwhelmingly in the playoffs. This is a game that I think the Texans were to take advantage of. They should be able to hang in there, and I think Houston will be able to pull off a stunner down in Dallas there. So they'll go 8-3. Houston is then hosting Tennessee. Rivalry game the first time there. I think the Texans, I know Tennessee might think they're playing better with Will Levis at the quarterback position. They don't have Derrick Henry anymore, and I think that's going to really hurt them down the stretch. So, hard to say. It's always a tough game when you're playing Tennessee, but I think Houston will take care of business again. So that'll be 9-3. Then Week 13, the Texans at Jacksonville. They have really had some great success down in Jacksonville, and I think that continues on as well. So Houston will win that one. So after 13 weeks, the Texans will be 10-3. They have a bye week in Week 14, but then comes the brutal gauntlet of games. First up, it's Week 15. You're hosting Miami, Tua Tagovailoa, an upgraded Dolphins offense, which includes a recently signed Odell Beckham Jr. This will be a very powerful game to watch from an offensive perspective. But again, I think the Texans are just going to continue to have their way, so they'll probably win that one. And this means that the Texans would have won 5 straight games. But then, this is the next stretch of games that's going to be really difficult. First up, Saturday, December 21st, you have Week 16 at Kansas City against the defending Super Bowl champions. I think Houston will push Kansas City and give them a tough test. This is a potential AFC Championship matchup, and I think the Texans will fare well with Kansas City, but I think the Chiefs are going to have too much for them. So I think Kansas City will win that game. And then Houston has to quickly turn around and return to Houston to take on the Ravens on Christmas Day, mind you. So you're talking about a 4-day wait in between the games, which is very unfair if you look at a schedule, and especially with the teams you're playing. But you're taking on the Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson, a rematch of the AFC Divisional Round. I think the Texans will be better prepared for Baltimore, unlike the playoffs. But I just think the Ravens have that special chemistry going on here. This is a team that I think will definitely want to redeem themselves after losing the AFC Championship game. So ultimately, as much as I would like to give Houston a Merry Christmas and a victory, I think you're going to have to give that to Baltimore for this occasion. So the Texans will fall to go to 11-5. And then, of course, the last game is between the Texans and the Titans. And I think by this point, Houston will either have the division clinched or a playoff spot clinched. And I think they might be playing just for a seed. But I think this could be a game where, depending on what happens, Houston might be facing off the Tennessee Titans, who would like nothing more than to pull it off the win. And I think the Texans may want to save some of their starters by this point to get some guys rested up and ready to go for a potential playoff game if it gets there. So ultimately, I'm going to give Tennessee this one. So in the end, Houston will finish with an 11-6 record, which in my opinion might be good for third, if not second, in the AFC. And that is the way I think this game, this season will go for Houston. So these opinions might change, these predictions might change, but at the end of the day, I think this will be a good season for the Texans. I think this will be another stepping stone to get to where they want to go. And fortunately, I think this will be a great year. I know I said that a couple of times, but I think this Texans team is ready to take that next step. So we'll have more talks about that as the season goes on. We'll also talk about the NFL. But at the end of the day, we got our schedules. Woohoo! So now we know who we're playing, when we're playing, what time we're playing, how many primetime games we got. Boy, oh boy. Well, unless it depends on the team that you root for as well. But anyways, folks, that's going to conclude another episode of Crocking, Locking, and Dropping with the K-Ruck. I hope you guys know that I am doing all I can to be the best that I can be in this business, and I hope you take my opinions. Hey, listen, just let me know how you feel in these comments. Give me some advice on what I can do to improve. I'm always learning to improve. And you can listen to this podcast on app or Spotify, and also my YouTube channel at KWCLINE91. So that's going to wrap things up here. Thanks you guys for listening in. I hope you have yourselves a great day, and go you, because you deserve all the support that you can get.